Let's start our preview now of next Saturday's home game against Nottingham Forest. This will also be the first game of the new stadium layout at St Mary's and a debut for the Northern Wall, with the safe standing and the away fans in a new position as well. And of course, Forest at home is still a game to make Saints fans wince after that diabolical showing in the relegation season, resulting in a 1-0 defeat. That was, of course, under Nathan Jones, who at the time was statistically one of the best managers in Europe, of course. Very much his words, not mine. Delighted to say that here to give us an insight into all things Forest.
Yeah, it did feel like 2 points drop. I was just listening in there. So refreshing to hear another Premier League team bemoaning their goalkeeper stocks. We've spent hours and hours over the past 3 years doing exactly the same thing. Signed a load, sold a load, got a few in the twos that we can't ship out, and had Keylor Navas on loan at one point as well. But Saturday's game, bit of a frustration. The players could live with the level. None of our debutants started the game. Saw a little bit from the bench, but first half deserved the lead. Good value for it. Missed a couple of chances, but they were resurgent second half. We were on the rope, so I think all things told, a fair result. And lots of work-ons ahead of our game against Southampton.
Michael, I'm just interested to ask you. Nuno's obviously a very divisive manager, divisive style. He's obviously had success at some jobs and not so much at others. What's your take, and what's the general take of the Forest fans?
He had a bit of a hide into nothing at first, given that he'd replaced Steve Cooper, who'd taken us from 24th in the Championship to an unexpected promotion and kept us in. And it was still a divisive decision when the decision was made to bullet Cooper. So Nuno came in and had an immediate pop, victory at Newcastle with a Chris Wood hat-trick, and we beat Man United in and amongst that as well. So he started well. You could see straight away he wanted for us to be a front foot side, not to play on the counter, to enjoy possession, to build attacks, to allow wingers to play as luxury players with very little defensive responsibility. And he has transformed our XG in that regard. However, it hasn't quite translated to an upturn in points. I think that said, we can see the logic. He's certainly winning fans over week to week. Our recruitment in the last couple of windows has been far more considered than the abject chaos of the 4 or 5 that went before. So yeah, he's grown on me. He's never going to have that connection, for want of a better word, that Steve Cooper had, given the journey that he had to take us from where we were to where we are. But he's a proven Premier League manager, and all things told, I think he is equipping us to believe that we can push beyond this scrap amongst the bottom 5.
Yeah, look, we're all friends here. We're all sort of honest with our expectations and each other. And you're starting your 3rd season in the Premier League. Is the hope simply that it's not a relegation season?
No, I think we've got to look a bit loftier than that now. As I said, it hasn't been a revolving door. The 11 players that started at the weekend were all with us last season, and it hasn't been any kind of rip-up start again. It's an evolution, and the side that started was pretty easy to guess. Once we'd found out that Milenkovic, our new Serbian signing at centre-half, had been suspended for that first game. So the big change you're going to see in Forest now is this wing play with Anthony Elanga, absolute speed merchant out of Man United, and Callum Hudson-Odoi, who looks to be recapturing something like his best form, his early career promise, and looks a real threat. I think we thought for a while this team was going to be built around Morgan Gibbs-White, who'd been given that license to roam from the luxury spot in the hole behind a lone striker. But it was increasingly apparent at the weekend that we're just desperate to manufacture ball for Callum Hudson-Odoi, relieve him of all defensive responsibility, and just allow him to stand on his fullback and get at him as often as he can. So yeah, expectation is rising. There was an interesting poll in the Athletic said Forest are the most optimistic supporters in the Premier League, but there's ambition from the ownership. Nuno's certainly not too interested in being in a relegation scrap every year, and I genuinely believe we can push into those 12th, 13th spots that have eluded us to this point.
Steve, I think it's probably fair to say that this is the first winnable game of the season. The home games are obviously going to be crucial this year. Such a good run at home last season. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've always got to look at. I mean, your home games are your bread and butter. I mean, usual cliches apply. And first game in front of the fans after promotion. Obviously, the way the ground's been moved around in terms of obviously home only in the northern stand is going to be interesting to see how that dynamic works. Because obviously people have moved into the stand from other areas of the ground, and you're not quite sure whether the noise is going to be concentrated in little pockets of the stand or whether it will kind of be sort of manufactured from the middle and spread out to the corners, if you like. But certainly shoving the away fans into the corner, as happens as we get done at away grounds up and down the country, I think is kind of a fairly pragmatic and sensible move from that perspective. But certainly in terms of what we're looking at sort of on the pitch, you just look at like last season's league table and you target anybody that finished, I mean, realistically below 9th. You're looking at all of those and thinking, okay, well, any home game against those, and you're expecting to get something. Not necessarily going to win you're not going to win every home game, obviously, but you're expected to be competing in those games. The games against Man Cities and Arsenals and Liverpools, they're a free hit. You can, as long as you don't get done 6 or 7, then you can largely write those off as a free hit. But the games at home against the sides that certainly, I mean, I use the word historically as a sort of relatively sort of recent thing, but have been in and around the bottom 3, certainly the bottom half of the table for the last few years. Those are definitely games you've got to be looking at winning. And again, it's much like last season. You get a few wins under your belt, and suddenly it becomes a habit. And the same is true of losing. That if you've been a winning team and suddenly the wheel turns the other way, it can be a little bit hard to sort of arrest the sort of slump, as we found even last season when we had those 2 runs of defeats, either side of the long unbeaten run. That all of a sudden it's everyone's kind of wondering where the next point's coming from, and yet one thing going in your favour, and suddenly the wind and the mood changes. So yeah, if we can get off to a winning start Saturday, then yeah, I think you're looking very optimistic all of a sudden. But if you go and lose at home to, I mean, it's not teams like Forest. It is more you're losing at home to a team that finished a handful of points above the bottom 3 last season, and suddenly you're thinking, oh god, this is going to be a long old slog, and you're suddenly starting to be very sort of concerned with what progress has been made.
Glen, thinking back to that Forest at home game under Nathan Jones, I mean, it's hard to imagine. I know you don't want to, but no. I'm going to try and get it out of you. It can't get much worse than that, can it? Really?
No. I mean, you have to kind of write that one up. I mean, at the time, I don't think Forest had scored a goal, or they'd maybe scored 1 goal the entire first half of the season away from home. And Nathan Jones's tactics, as we discussed at the time, was basically to smash the ball into the floodlights for 95 minutes and hope that the giant Forest defenders missed something, which they didn't. And in a strange parallel to our game on against Newcastle, in that game, Lianco trod on the ball and we gave a stupid goal away, and then we didn't have enough about us to get back into it. So the Premier League, whether you're playing Forest, Newcastle, whoever it is you're playing, if you give goals away, it's unforgiving. And obviously we could do that in the Championship and get away with it, but adapt or die, basically. So we have to keep it tight. I can't see there being sort of like many goals in this particular game, but because I mean both teams will see it as a game where they've got to target 3 points in this game. Forest certainly will against the newly promoted side, and we will, as for all the reasons Steve said. First game at home against the team that finished, in the bottom 6 last season. So both teams will target it, but I think it could be quite cagey. I'll be quite impressed with. I mean, what I saw of the Bournemouth Forest game, the way they set up with Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs White, Elanga. I mean, Chris Wood, we all know what he's about. He's a bit of a blunt instrument, but he's been effective at Premier League level for quite a long time. But those three playing just behind him are where the danger is going to come from. I'll be very interested to see how those three, because we'll try and dominate the ball, obviously, and it'll be interesting to see how much those three fancy working back into midfield to try and get Forest a foothold in the game. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But I am expecting it to be a hell of a lot better than that game a year and a half ago when under the management of Nathan Jones. Thank you very much for reminding me.
Alfie, a little bit of team news maybe from you on this one. Do you think Lallana's going to be back in the squad, and will we see the elusive Ross Stewart, do you think?
It depends. Do you want the short answer or the long answer?
Let's go with the short answer.
No.
For both. Lallana and Stewart.
Yeah, the long answer is that I'll just being a bit dramatic. The long answer is they might be back for the Carabao Cup game next week. So that's the current timeline. But we've been here before with Ross Stewart, particularly, obviously, and they do have to be really careful with him. We have to understand that. But yeah, the hope is we'll see him for the Carabao Cup game away at Cardiff, which at least gives us a reason to travel there and make that trip on a presumably grim Tuesday night. Although it might be quite nice actually in summer. So yeah, I don't think we'll see either of them this weekend. Same for Kamaldeen Suleiman. I think he'll be back in the Carabao Cup game as well. I think Ross Stewart does exist. I think he's back in training as of tomorrow morning. So that's positive. And yeah, hopefully he'll be back out next week. I can ask Michael a quick question actually, because as a fantasy player, I noticed that you've got a decent run of fixtures, and Saints are now approaching this run where we've just obviously had Newcastle away and it's tough. And I think at least sort of 3 or 4 of the next 5 we would consider to be winnable games. So how are they going to approach this one at Saints? Is it going to be a bit nervy if they get nothing?
Well, you're going to see a flat back 4 and wingers that don't have much defensive responsibility. So our fallback against top 6 sides is to play 3 centre halves and be a little bit more deep and compact. So I'm not necessarily expecting too much of a cagey game, because we have become a front foot side against bottom 10 under Nuno. So in a fantasy sense, I think I'd back Callum Hudson-Odoi just because we're manufacturing so much ball for him. He has Nico Williams at right back, who himself is more in the wing back mould, likes to get past him and just create space for Callum to nudge inside and have a bit of a ping. He's got goals in him. We've got this holding midfield. Ibrahim Sangare was a bit of a enigma last season. He'd had malaria, he'd been to AFCON, all kinds of reasons why he couldn't get going. But in pre-season, in that first game, he seems like a bit of a talisman centre mid. So they'd probably be my 2 players to watch. There's no secret in Murillo. There's no secret in Gibbs White anymore. And everyone knows what Chris Wood does, as you've seen yourselves in his 10 seasons in the Premier League. So I think from a Southampton perspective, you've just got to control the balls into the wide players and what they're able to do when they're on it, because you don't want to be on an island against Anthony Elanga or Callum Hudson-Odoi.
Well, Michael, it's been great to have you with us this evening on the podcast. Just before you go, I'd like to get a quick prediction from you for Saturday at St Mary's. Do you think it's going to be cagey? Do you think it's going to be an open game? How do you see it going? And a score prediction from you, please.
Yeah, I think we'll come at Southampton. I'm going to back us to score first, but I don't see us keeping a clean sheet on the road. So I'm going to stick true to what I'm saying this end as well. I think Forest will win 2-1. But as you've heard and read elsewhere, we are the most blindly optimistic fans in the Premier League. So all results possible.
I also saw someone on Twitter earlier saying it's the tree on the badge derby as well, which I absolutely hated, to be honest with you. But I don't know why I've repeated it. Anyway, Michael, it's been brilliant to have you. All the best for the season as well. It's been good to catch up. Cheers.
Cheers, fellas. Go well.
Cheers.
Michael Temple there from the Forest Focus podcast. Glenn, let's get a prediction from you then for this game on Saturday. What are you going with?
Well, I'd be surprised if there's not a bit of beer, is that the right word, in the approach of both teams in this game. I think it's a game that neither team will want to lose, bearing in mind they're playing a newly promoted side, we're playing aside from it's expected to be in the bottom six, in and around us. So, but I come out of the Newcastle game with a little bit more optimism. And at the end of the day, their result drawing at home to Bournemouth is not a good result. So I see that making them a little bit more more in need of getting some sort of result against us. So I'm going to go for a squeaky 1-0 win for us. I think we'll be.
Wow.
Yeah, I think. I mean, we weren't far from a clean sheet on Saturday. Let's face it. So I think in open play, I mean, you can never mitigate for disasters, can you? And stupidity, but I think as long as we avoid the disasters, I think we're on for a good day on Saturday. So I'll go for a 1-0 win. I don't know who's going to score. That could be anyone.
Own goal.
It's not going to be Rod Stewart by the sound of it.
No.
What about you, Steve?
I think it'll be. Yeah, I do think it'll be quite open. As he rightly said, their system with the two wingers, neither of those two are interested in defending. So while that poses problems for us, it also gives us opportunities going the other way. You want to target both of their fullbacks because they're getting no support from the guy in front of them. But it all comes down to us. We've got to slightly pick up the pace of the passing, I think. One thing that was a little bit frustrating second half yesterday was that while we kept possession well, we weren't really moving Newcastle from side to side at any great pace. So everything was in front of them, and it was all a little bit comfortable at times. Forest aren't as good defensively as Newcastle are, so therefore there's no reason for us to be for there to be any sort of hesitancy in our sort of attacking play and our movement. So hopefully we can take the good bits from yesterday, get rid of the rubbish bits, and get on the front foot, because they are vulnerable, much as we are defensively. But yeah, we've got to start taking some of the chances that we're creating, and that will be the key. But I do think we'll struggle to keep them out at the other end, with the pace that they've got and just the 2 years experience with that team. It's for all that we obviously have a bit of a giggle at Forest's transfer policy over the last couple of years. The 11 they put out on Saturday was one that you recognise as a Nottingham Forest team from the last 2 seasons. So they are quite a settled unit these days. And they've got a lot of pace up front, which has always been a problem for us and will continue to be, I suspect. So I'm not sure we're quite going to be doing enough to win this, but I'll go for an entertaining 2-2.
2-2. That does sound like a good game. So we've got 2-2, a 1-0. What about you, Alfie?
Yeah, I'd love for this game to be one where Saints just absolutely explode and just come out and, like say, score goals and make the atmosphere what it could be with all the stadium changes and things like that. I totally agree with Steve, and I thought it was interesting insight from Michael to hear that it was going to be, potentially end to end. There's going to be spacing behind both teams. So I don't know who's going to score the goals, but I'll go for a 3-2 win.
3-2 win.
That won't be right. I probably should have just played the aggregate, but
all right. Well, we have actually opened up the TSP Prediction League to all our patrons this season. So if you want to play along, all you need to do is sign up to our Patreon. It's free, and you'll find the link on there to submit your prediction. Need to shout out Peter this week, the only person to land a 3-pointer with a correct 1-0 result against Newcastle. He was less pessimistic than the rest of us, I think, with that 1-0. So well done, Peter, on getting a 3-pointer there.